In this lesson, we're going to look at that same example in section 2.2, where we're asked to use the drive-through service times to create a histogram, a frequency polygon, and an ogive, and then determine the shape of the distribution using the histogram. We did all of these by hand previously. Now let's see how to apply technology. In Excel, I have my frequency distribution table, and I'm going to start out by selecting my data, coming up to Insert, and I'll first create the histogram. And the histogram is created with the bar chart. The histogram is created with this 2D column chart. We'll start with this one. You can see we have our classes here along the x-axis labels, our frequency labeling the y-axis. Let's clean up our table. We need some labels. So we'll add a primary horizontal and a primary vertical and change the words. And then let's correct the title. You don't have to use the type of graph's name in the title. It's understood by the graph itself that this is a histogram. Make the bars come together. To make the bars come together, if we click on them, it should bring up this format menu. And we can change the color if we want to. We can add a border, change the color of the border so that we can actually see it. Now that just worked on that one. The hope is that we do it for all of them. And we have to make sure this says Format Data Series to guarantee that we get it for all of them. There we have the black border, and now we can see all of the border in our graph. We come over here to the bars, the series options, and let's take this gap width down to 0. So now it looks like a traditional histogram. Okay, I'll move this out of the way so I still have my data over here. I'm going to copy my data and insert zeros at the beginning and at the end. And this is to indicate the anchoring on the x-axis for our frequency polygon. So there's our histogram. We've created a histogram. A few clicks all around this insert and then the chart section over here. If I want to do a frequency polygon, it's pretty much the same steps. I just need to add the 0 at the beginning of the data and at the end to make sure that I'm anchoring that frequency polygon to the x-axis. So I'll select this new table, insert, and now we're going to pick the line chart, the line graph, right under the bar chart. And we'll just do a simple 2D line. And there's a little bit of strangeness going on, so we need to walk through how to fix it. Before I do that, I'm going to move this down. Move it down a little bit so that it's off of my histogram. And this orange graph is that of my frequency polygon. As you can see, it takes the same shape as our histogram, but it's a line graph. So we need to get rid of the blue line. The graph is just reading the data, not in the way that we want it to. So in order to correct it, I need to right-click in the chart area and go down to the Select Data menu, or the Select Data option. When I click on Select Data, it gives me two series for the legend, the time and the frequency. I only want the frequency to show up, not the time. So I'm going to unselect the time. Also, over here on the right, it has horizontal axis labels. I'm going to click Edit and put this axis label range as the range in my frequency distribution, but notice I still have blanks for the zeros. You want to make sure you capture those blanks for the zeros so that it shows up correctly on the graph. And then when we expand it and click OK, we can see those labels, and then click OK, and our graph has now changed. Now, what if instead of the classes, we wanted to use the midpoints? Let's make that correction. We calculated these midpoints before. We're just taking the two numbers, adding them up, and dividing by 2. And if we do that, we get the midpoints even of the first and the last that anchor us, so we can label them that way. Changing those inside the table, notice, also changes the labels in the graph. So we get that change. We can decide whether or not we want the legend there. I usually don't, unless I have more than one series plotted. If there's only one thing here, I just leave the legend off. And then we need our menu. Let's go to Design, Add Chart Element, Titles for the axes. Clean these up. And there we have our frequency polygon. The last thing to do is to create our cumulative frequency distribution so that we can create our ogive. In creating our cumulative frequency table, we were using the class boundaries, so I will use the same here. And again, we did this by hand already, so we know what these are. But if you needed to determine them to get the boundaries, we would take the boundary of the first lower limit, 75. Remember that a boundary value is one more decimal place than the data and always ends in a 5. So 74.5 would round up to 75. And then between 124 and 125 is the value 124.5, halfway between them, and so forth. A reminder that the midpoints here and the boundary values here are also the same width as our frequency distribution. And in this case, our frequency distribution width is 50. So we're really just adding 50 each time. In order to create our ogive, we need the 0 in there so we can anchor it to the x-axis. So that's one addition that we would need to make to our cumulative frequency distribution in order to graph it properly. So we have the 0 in there. For the very first value, we're going to say equals, and we can use this frequency distribution, but I'll go up to the original one, equals 11, so it should plop it in there. And then to get the next value in our cumulative frequency distribution, we're going to take previous value in the table plus the next value in our frequency distribution. And we will repeat that, but an easy way to repeat it is to just grab that handle and drag, and it automatically updates our formula. Now we have our cumulative frequency distribution with the added 0. We'll go up to Insert. An ogive is another line graph, so we'll click on the line, we'll grab the 2D line, and there are two things to notice. Okay, it's giving us 2 more lines again. Because we selected 2 columns of data, it thinks we want 2 different lines. Notice that time is in seconds. I don't want that for my ogive. I only want the cumulative frequency, so we need to clean it up again. Inside the chart area, we're going to right-click to bring the drop down and click on Select Data. Unselect the time, edit the horizontal axis. Horizontal axis labels are going to be for time. I'm going to see if I can grab that first one and if it will update. No. So let me go back, skip the label, and then we have our values along the bottom. I'm going to click OK, delete the legend, add the axis titles. Always add the axis titles. And this isn't just frequency, it's cumulative frequency. We are creating an ogive, so we want to make sure that that is clear. And there we have our ogive, all the way up to 50, and 50 is the total number in our data set. Since it doesn't go above 50, we can actually alter the chart a little bit more. So if I double click in the area, it gives me some more options. Let's see if I can find this plot area. No. I want to look at the vertical axis, so I'm going to click on the drop-down menu on the format. Gives you a lot of different options. Chart area allows us to change some things. Chart title, axis title, plot area. I'm going to click on the axis options, and I'm going to go over to the bars. Notice if I click down on the axis options, I have minimum and maximum. Since my maximum is 50, I can just let it be 50. I can also change the labels. So here I've changed it to 5. I could change it back to 10 if I wanted to. I can make it be 1, but 1 is going to be really crowded, as you can see. So there's a lot of stuff that we can change. Explore these format menus. They allow you to change what's going on in your graph. You can change the color, you can change the spacing, a lot of different things that you can make to change the graph. And there's our ogive. So using technology gives us some great looking graphs that might make it easier to analyze and discuss. Practice with the technology, practice a little by hand so that you get used to the nuances of each of these graphs. We'll be learning more in the next section.